Okay, so good evening. We have a typical quarterly meeting agenda, but before we start, I would like to welcome our two newest members. Congratulations, Ms. Charlton and Mr. Testani. Thank you and welcome. And again, congratulations and nice swearing in last night. All went as planned. And congratulations to Ms. LeClaire, too, for her victory. So Ms. LeClaire is not new. She is going on her 19th year here, so she's our senior member. 19 years, a long time. But Mary, thank you for your service for 19 years. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say anything, or we can go right into it.
All right. Just that I am happy to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you.
And I just thank you for that warm welcome and look forward to working with everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, yeah, we're all getting used to the button here. So far, so good. So again, typical agenda, 4 items. 1, to review the current status of the town's pension and OPEB funds, and then we'll review the abbreviated Board of Ed Q1 fiscal year 20 financial position, and we'll review the abbreviated town Q1 fiscal year financial position, and to hear, consider, and act upon any consideration. So we'll start with the town pension and OPEB funds. Mr. Mayor, you were going to lead us through this. Oh, maybe so.
Mr.
Yeah, thank you,
Gallagher's
Mr.
gonna do
DeWitt.
it.
Just want to, before we start, Sheila Marmion could not make it here tonight. She is traveling, and Mr. Walsh called me and wanted to let the board know that he was picking his son up at the airport and traffic was backed up, so he's not going to be able to make it here tonight either. So thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, turning it over to you.
And I'm turning it over to Mr. Caliper, member of the Joint Retirement Investment.
I'll be presenting for the chairman of the JRIB. Brian Vahue could not make it tonight. My name is Eric Caliper. I'm a member of the Police Fire Pension Fund. Before you, I know we have some new members here. So before you, you should have 2 flash reports from Callan. One should be investment measurement service, and one should be the pension fund, and one should be the OPEB fund. We're going to start with the pension fund. So all the investments are in line with their targets. The total fund as of September 30th, 2019 is $392 million at $219,000. That's a net increase of 1.26 over last quarter. Major changes that took place in the quarter was we divested from Montgomery Wells Fargo of $37 million. That was a domestic fixed income fund. The joint investment fund has decided to disperse that money 50-50 between Sykes and PIMCO. And in a cost-saving measure, we have renegotiated the fees with People's Bank. They were our custodian for the fund, and we saved approximately 1 basis point, which is approximately $39,000 a year to the pension fund. Are there any questions on the pension fund?
Turn it over to the board for any questions. No? The only question I have are any of the funds on a watch list? Are they all moving along and you're getting the returns that you expect over the years, last year and over the last 3 to 5 years as well?
So on page 2, you'll see Stewart Investors. That's something that we're going to be looking at, a new vehicle for international equity that's currently on our watch list. I should add, for the fiscal year to date for the quarter, the return was 79 basis points, with the the total fund benchmark being 98 basis points.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the pension? Okay, then let's move over to OPEB.
Okay, seeing there's no questions on the pension, the OPEB trust is basically the money that's used to fund retiree healthcare benefits for town employees. That current trust sits at $49,248,886 for a net increase of $84,000 over Q1 of this year. Its investments are also in line with target, and the OPEB total for Q1 return was 37 basis points. The OPEB benchmark being 60 basis points.
Any questions? Okay, the only question I would have is, when Mr. Vahey has been here over the years, and he had mentioned that when the OPEB market value would get to 50 million or above, that you may be looking at more just to diversify further and take a look at different funds to invest in, possibly commodities or what have you.
So recently we have invested into real estate. Originally there was only an equity and a fixed income portfolio. We have recently invested into real estate, and we're currently revising the instrument policy and guidelines. Its draft version will have domestic equities, non-US equities, global fixed income, and real estate at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Have a
great
good Thanksgiving.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, we'll ask the Board of Ed to come on up. We'll review the Q1 fiscal year 20 financial position. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, here we go. I would like to thank the Board of Finance for their support of our move to Meadow Street. Thank you.
I don't know how this is going to work because I'm used to using my hands when I talk. So you'll notice there is a few more documents in the report this time. That's because of a new state requirement. As of July 1st, 19, we have to provide current and projected revenues and expenses to the town legislative body, so we just provided it to all 3 town bodies. One of the items in there are the grant items, projected revenues, which are basically the budgeted revenues. It's way too early in the year for those numbers to have any meaning. And there's also a projection, which we didn't typically do for the first quarter because it's, again, so early in the year and there's so many unknowns. In preparing for these reports, I decided to reclassify certain expenses. We have like 5 or 6 major classifications. In order to simplify the projection process, we moved some items from maintenance. We moved special ed transportation and aids up to pupil personnel, and speech and language repairs from maintenance up to pupil personnel. And there were some middle school tutors in the school section that we moved up to personnel. I just mentioned that because if you compare last year's budget document to this, you'll see that there was some movement. Because of that reclassification and because this item was so late on the agenda in November, we took advantage of that and did the first quarter report as of 10/31. So these are not 9/30 numbers, these are 10/31, just want to explain that. So you'll notice on the projection, the total The bottom line projected balance is a negative 500,000 roughly. In that number, that included the moving expenses and the expenses associated with the maintenance and transportation change in location. So again, thank you for that transfer that was done. So that brings the projection down to a negative 362. That's not all that alarming of a number on a $181 million budget in the first quarter. So we're just, as always, we monitor everything. Personnel, the balance is on line 9 to 367. I just want to note there that without the change in how we budgeted for staff replacement this year, you might remember we went from a negative 1.2 to a negative 590 because of the projected deficit we had last year. If we hadn't changed that number, we would have been in a deficit situation of like 262. Overall, we're about 2.8 FTEs under budget in staffing. Benefits, they're right now balanced in total. We are monitoring health insurance very closely. That could present a problem for us this year, but it's way too early to tell. And you'll see under the pupil personnel, the negative, it's almost 1.1. The majority of that is professional expenses and consultations, and then again, the sped transportation that we moved up from maintenance and the sped transportation aids. Part of that is because of a new contract. We went out to bid last spring, so we got new rates. It's a more robust contract, I'd say. We require cameras. It's a heavier duty contract, so part of that overage is because of half of it about is for the rates, and the other half is just for changes in the transportation. Schools we're holding harmless right now. We have some savings in support because of the superintendent search. We funded it all last year, and then we have magnet tuition we have some savings there. Maintenance, we started the year very early in July with a Osborne Hill roof project of $250,000, and that was unbudgeted, and Mill Hill boiler. There's a number of $150,000 in here for that, but it came in much lower in bid. Regular transportation's over because of a drop in pre-K tuition and magnet transportation grant. And then the capital, there's the special ed and maintenance is holding some funding there to help offset their overages. So that's it in a nutshell for the first quarter, 1920.
Thank you, Ms. Monsell. Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these are just your drivers, obviously, right? This isn't the whole budget, clearly, right? So you've segmented the major drivers into these categories, which makes a lot of sense. Thank you. What's really driving the sped expense? I mean, that's the single largest underrun, if you will, sped expenses at $647,000.
Our special ed director, Mr. Mancusi's here. I have him come up and answer that question directly.
And obviously, this is your predicted. This is not this quarter projection. This is year-end projection, right?
What we're currently
projecting for year-end, right? Got it.
Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education and Special Programs. The reason for the projected deficit at this time primarily is due to a significant increase in the number of one-to-one nurses that we've needed to cover student needs. And then we've had to hire some additional consults to to work with students to maintain in-district programming.
What was that last term? I'm sorry, you had to hire additional,
For our professional consultations, we've had to increase the amount of support we get from some consultants to work with students with significant needs to maintain in-district programming.
and is that, I'm sorry if I may. Are any of these costs contained within the ECC?
No, they're not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Mr. Mottola?
Can someone just fill us in about what happened at Osborne Hill and Mill Hill?
So Osborne Hill was we have a roof that had a warranty on it that was failing, started early spring with multiple issues, so we ended up going out to a contractor to get a temporary repair done to the roof, which was temporary but quite significant. It is in our capital waterfall to be replaced this coming year, but we had to get it weather tight for the school year. It was too late in the year to actually go out to do a roof replacement. Most contractors own their roofs by early spring so that they can get them done over the summertime. As for Mill Hill, the boiler was identified. They found water on the floor, so we pulled it apart to do a full inspection, and it identified it's a 10-section boiler, and 7 out of the 10 sections had significant cracking in them, so it needed to be replaced. We were able to save some money there by reusing the burners and only replacing the sectional portion of the boiler.
You said that there's a warranty for the Osborne Hill roof. Is that, so we had to spend $250,000 and that's with the warranty?
That is with the warranty. Our legal department is in negotiations with the warranty company to see what we can recoup from them based on the warranty on staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mrs. Leclerc?
On the Mill Hill replacement, for the boiler, is that going to be able to be used when we do the renovations to the school?
Yes, we utilize Silver Petrocelli, who is the design engineers for the remodel of the school, to come up with the specs for the boiler replacement, so that it would be in line with what they are doing further down the road.
Okay. Can I go into another topic? Okay. Doreen had mentioned that the staffing was 2 FTEs below what we had budgeted. So I guess I wanted a little more information on that and how our enrollment came in for this year, whether it was how we had budgeted, if it's below or above.
There was one fewer elementary classroom than budgeted, and 1.6 fewer certified staff, and that is probably a dozen or more tweakings of, up and down of art, music, PE, world language. There's a whole list of them, but they net out to a negative 1.6. One fewer social workers. And then there was an increase in paras and a decrease in special ed trainers for a net increase of 0.3. And it's 3.3 fewer FTEs on the board budget, but we added a half FTE in the grant for immigrant and youth grant teacher.
Mary, just to follow up on that, would you mind providing us with a summary of that, what we just said? Yeah. Just on the capital expenditures, do you mind if I go back to that? Can you give us like a guideline of exactly how much the boiler repairs are going to be? And I know we talked about $250,000 between Mill Hill, correct, and Osborne Hill. But is there a breakdown of exactly how much each one is going to cost for repair? Besides including the warranty, obviously.
So the 150 for the Mill Hill boiler went out to bid, and it actually came in at 62,000. So 62 will be the total cost for that project. That was the lowest qualified bidder, yes. The second one was the Mill Hill roof. I don't have the total with me in front of me, so I will have to get that for you. But that was the 250,000 that we allocated for that roof. I know we came in slightly under, but I'll have to get the actual number for you.
Go ahead.
So your numbers here in this document are based on a $150,000 Mill Hill boiler, correct?
Correct, before we went out to bid.
So now it's 62?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Testani, anything else? Anything else for the Board of Ed? Mr. Peterson?
I also want to say on behalf of the board that we do thank you for the vote of the moving expenses. That was it's a large weight off our mind. And we also wanted to extend our congratulations to the new members of the Board of Finance. We're looking forward very much to working with you. Also, I just wanted to let Mrs. LeClaire know that we have the enrollment numbers and we didn't answer the first time. But
Thank you.
Excuse me. We don't have the projection right with us, but I can tell you, well, actually, you know what, it's probably better if I can get you that against the actual enrollment, and then you can see the difference. It was very close, but we'll give you the exact numbers. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cummings. Ms. Charlton?
Sure, just an overall question. In a number of places in the commentary, there are comments to the effect that you know, some of the expenses are unpredictable. I think you used the word volatile. So I realize it's early in the year, but given that there's some uncertainty in some of these numbers, like healthcare, et cetera, how can you just help me understand, how is that managed? I mean, to the extent that these numbers are volatile and there may be some unanticipated costs, what are, you know, how do you look at that? What are some of the levers that might be available to offset that cost, and you know, how are you managing that?
I can speak in general about how we approach those types of things, and perhaps Ms. Mansell can deliver more specifics. But I would say to you that the things that we'll hold off on are, we'll hold off on instructional purchases, we'll hold off on professional development, we'll hold off on things that will occur later in the year, even though, even given the current numbers, if a position, for example, is not necessary, you know, it's not an emergency to fill a position, we'll hold off on those types of things. So we work throughout the year to be conscientious about those things, and I mean, we're always conscientious, but we're perhaps a lot more cautious when if the number were to begin to climb, or if we see some volatility in special ed outplacements or in some of the health benefit issues. I don't know if
we balance salaries every month, so we monitor that very, very closely. We do the same with health insurance, track all the changes, because I mean, it goes up and down constantly. Maintenance does its own projection and follows its expenses every month also, and they submit a projection to us, so as does special ed. And those are our two, those are all our large areas, and the two areas with the volatility. You know, we hold everybody else within budget. They can't expend any more unless they transfer money within, and so that's how we monitor everything.
one more follow-up question, if I could, on the special ed, on the $1 million projection. How did you develop the full year projection there? You mentioned that, there was an increase in the number of one-to-one nurses, and there were additional consultations with consultants. So are you projecting it for the year based on the specific student population, or is that subject to additional change based on things that come up?
We project the best we can based on our knowledge of our student population at the time we make the projections. Once the budget is passed, and there's unforeseen changes, we adjust accordingly. In terms of students' medical needs that were unanticipated, we have to provide that support for students, and that's really where, we fall at risk for falling into deficit. In terms of our outplacements, our students who attend approved private special education programs outside of the Fairfield Public Schools, we're always working with families on preparing students to return to district, to one of our, public school programs versus having to pay the tuition to, out of district programs, if it's appropriate for the student.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
I'll follow up on Ms. Charlton said. And I get it's first quarter, so I get it. Well, first quarter plus a month, so thank you for that. But we're very often in this situation where we're talking about sped expenses and we're overrunning. Are we missing something in the calculations at budget time? I mean, should we be adding in another 20% at budget time? Because it's always this way.
It's kind of like a contingency we should have something.
Yeah, exactly.
If we
right.
can do that, I know what you're saying. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, we've been having this discussion for the 12 years I've been on the board, right? And I don't know what the right answer is, but again, first quarter, second quarter, right through, we're always having this conversation, and most of the time, that number overruns and it's overcome by some other savings in the budget, which is good, right? But, just striving for a better budgeting process, I'm wondering if contingency or something is right.
I appreciate that question very much, particularly as we're right now in process of building the 2021 budget and having these very same conversations. As each of our department brings forward their numbers, and particularly in areas that demonstrate some volatility, utilities being another one, for example, one of the things we're looking at are what are the historicals, what are the averages that we're seeing, and we try to base it off of some of that. I think our concern when we're striving to get to that absolute bottom line that we think is necessary to run is what could a contingency impact be on that bottom line, and then coming forward, defending it. I think that's our concern, because we want to be absolutely fair and transparent in the numbers, and that brings in the fudge factor, which I think we're all a little conscientious of. So, but we do try to work off that historical as much as possible. But as Mr. Mancusi said, when a budget is essentially put to bed in January on our end of it, and then students, it gives 8 months, 9 months for students still to move into the district. We can budget for the needs of the students in place, but and I know this is an overused example, but 1 or 2 students moving in those 8 months with significant needs, particularly a nursing need that's going to cost over $100,000, can really throw everything very quickly out of whack.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you saying that if the same students showed up next year, the exact same students, we'd probably be like right there, right? Because we know the individual needs of each student. It's the new students, which always amazes me that we have. Oh, it doesn't amaze me, but I mean, there's children moving into town, but these children it's a significant expense, clearly, especially when you say that most of that expense is driven by one-on-one nurses. Is that the right term, right? So I still think there's, historically we could say, we have 50 special needs children and 2 come into district every year. I mean, maybe that's the the variance. I don't know what the right number is, but I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Well, let me ask this then. Have we ever been under budget in this category? Like, ever?
You know, I've been a director in 2 districts now, and I've never experienced that. It would be nice.
Okay.
That's your goal for
Thank you.
2020.
Third quarter.
Third quarter.
That'd be nice. Okay, good questions. Thank you. Any further questions for the Board of Ed? Mr. Testani?
I just have a wonder where we are with the change in the location of the facility. I know thank you for complimenting the board as far as the storage facility. I just wondered where it is and what the process is, if you could bring us up to date, and perhaps bring the board some updated pictures whenever you've got some significant progress made.
Absolutely. I'll have Mr. Papa George address that. He's been really the driving force behind so much of this work, so.
So at this point, we really don't have any updated photos for you yet. We will get you some when we do. We're moving through the permitting process through the city of Bridgeport. It's been slower than moving through Fairfields, but we are getting to that point now. The landlords owe us, as part of the lease agreement, a cleaned and painted interior building, and they are in the process of cleaning and painting at this point. We hope to actually start work the first week in December, which would be Monday, have materials delivered, and then from there, we hope to move quickly. Our goal is to get our transportation department moved over there and operating during the Christmas break while there's limited buses on the road. So that would be our goal, and the maintenance department would be moving probably right either before or at the same time as that.
We're good, Mr. Testani? Yes, thank you. Mr. DeWitt, you had a question?
Just about, are you going to talk about the grants to date, or are you done? Because I'll ask about the grants if you're not done. So I guess my overall question on grants is, should we be concerned that as of the first quarter in 1 month, we're only 6% funded on our grants right now?
As far as the amount received? That count?
Actual revenue received, yes.
Yeah, no.
Should not be worried about that?
Well, anything that comes through the state, so anything that's not an internal grant, it has to be requested on a monthly basis. So you can't request the money until you're actually spending it. So we have to be very careful about that. So as of, let's see, when we would do it mid-month, so there was very little expended at this time when we requested, when we filed in October. You see, right, for what we
Filings as of
expended in
October.
September.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. The open choice state grant, that's not the individual revenue we receive from the students, right? Is that a separate state grant? I don't remember there being open choice state grant.
No, I
Third
didn't.
one down in state grant? Or is that the revenue that we are supposed to receive from the individual students?
It's from the state,
It is from the state.
but it's student-based, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you. So yes, okay, I get it. So we're really only 2 months in. You've only billed 2 months, even though we've got 4 months of data. You've really only billed for 2 months in the fiscal year. That's why a lot of these numbers are zero. Right, got it. Okay.
Sure, Mr. Testani?
Thank you. Just a thought on the special ed overrun. I just don't know if there's more potential grants that perhaps we can investigate to help at some of the additional costs. I'm sure maybe you have thought about it, or maybe it's been considered. Don't know what could be available that we could investigate.
What we currently are investigating, couple weeks, I'm meeting with several area directors of special education from area towns to talk about how we maybe can share programming opportunities so we can save costs while still delivering high-quality programs.
Just a question on the excess cost. We received, I think, 2 payments, right? One's in February? Okay, and when would the second one come in? In May. Okay. Is there any concern that they're going to shortchange us on this 3.5 million? Have you heard anything?
I've not heard anything to indicate that, no.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the board? No? Well, then, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great Thanksgiving. Okay, item number 3, to review the abbreviated town quarter 1 fiscal year 20 financial position. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start, and then I'll turn it over to the controller, Ms. Bossi. So you have the one-page document that was in your package. We'll start at the top of the page. We see that there's at this point, we're forecasting $1.4 million approximately positive variance for the year. Couple of interesting things there. As many of you know, and some of you may not know, where there's a tax sale in the budget. But the prior year taxes are actually $1 million ahead of normal. So the tax sale, I think, was budgeted for like a little over 2 million, 2.5 million, something like that. So we're already, so we're going to obviously follow that very closely. We have about a $300,000 favorable variance from the collection rate difference. We have $50,000 senior tax relief savings, and then there's about a $400,000 variance, positive variance with combining the overpayments and the court appeal estimates, and then the rest is just the difference in the receivables between when the on personal property, vehicles, and real estate, between the date that the grand list is determined and by the time it gets over into the tax collector's department and gets set up for billing, because there's all kinds of adjustments that happen between March and June 1. So that's that number. Investment income, that's going to be very intriguing this year. Some of you may remember last year we managed the market pretty well. I think we had like $1 million positive variance. This year, going into the year, you may or may not, if you follow this stuff, during budget season last year, as anticipated, interest rates were going to go up. The reality is interest rates, 1-year treasuries, for example, were 1.9 July 1, and today they're 1.55. So they've gone just the opposite direction. But I think we'll still do okay there. For those of you who don't know this, we're required to record the mark-to-market. So it's not just based upon the dividend income. It's the dividend income plus the change in market. So you have the interest rate risk, the duration risk, and the other risk aspects there. I'll turn the rest of revenue over to Ms. Bossi.
Slight favorable variance on the building revenue. Again, we can see a lot of favorability from Art and Fairview come in. So that's been driving a lot of our permitting, electrical, or plumbing permitting numbers. In addition to a couple of large apartment buildings in the metro area. So at this time, the building official has told me about $1 million over budget is what he's anticipating. State aid, this point, again, it's early on in the year. There's one light item that we know there was a unfavorable variance of about $95,000 between their final budget from the state and our final budget number. But again, that That varies a little bit over the months, over the quarters of when they give us money. That exact line item was for town aid roads and the municipal revenue share.
County roads, did I hear you say?
Yeah, it's about a $5 million if you add up all the lines together. So right now, it's projected just to be slightly under budget. And the last number on the revenue side is fire marshal fees. Again, due to the new structure that was put in, I believe, a year and a half ago. And again, this goes kind of hand in hand with the building permitting, which was favorable last year as well. They're still seeing a lot of favorability there. In October alone, Sacred Heart came in with plans for a 3 quad dorm that was $253,000 alone. So they have increased their budget for 21 as well. I believe the budget in 20 is like 160, and they're going up to 300 or so in the 21 budget.
Just for fire marshal fees?
Fire marshal fees.
What are the fees? I remember they did go up a couple years ago. Do you remember from what the variance was?
So it's a new fee structure based on, I believe, from what Kieran told me, it's a construction value dollar amount. It's a flat dollar amount up to, and I think it was as a result of going to surrounding towns to say, how do you guys bill for these? I'm not sure what the old fee structure was, but he did send me a schedule of what the new one is.
Yeah, but the variance is primarily activity, not fee structure. We knew the fee structure going into the budget process.
So that concludes the revenue piece. So we're estimating at this point, again, it's earlier on the year, at about a 1.9 favorable variance on the revenue side. On the expense side, there's one large driver and one smaller driver. We're projecting at this point $1 million in vacancies due to a bunch of positions that are open and I guess are on hold at the moment. But we do have a position by position listing, anticipated start date, and anticipated salary.
Yes, I think we did ask for that at one point. If we
Yeah,
could
you,
get-
you got it when we looked at it last time. We have, I think, about 15 positions that are open. The hiring has been frozen with the change in administration. The new administration asked us to wait till they got aboard after the election.
But do you
So-
think, okay, I'm sorry.
So basically, so we have, 15 or 17?
I believe it's around 17.
Yeah, so we have 17 open positions.
But is the $1 million based on not hiring for the rest of the year? Or do
No,
you
the $1 million is based upon the anticipated hire date and the anticipated salary.
Okay.
So it's a net number.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Testani?
Can we get just a current list? I understand that the administration has it on hold, but $1 million is, I'd like to get an understanding of what vacancies there are.
Give you the list, I can read you the list.
Just a copy for the next meeting is fine.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Or
Bob. That's fine.
email it to us, maybe? Does that work?
Email's
We'll
great.
mail-
You
email
can
it
call
out
me
to-
too, whatever you want. That's fine.
got it.
Thank you.
All right.
So what, are you going to email them to us or through
Yes, sir.
Jen in the packet? Okay, thank you. Any,
Well, actually, the meeting is,
next Tuesday?
next-
You could
yeah,
do that,
might just
whatever you want
put
to
in
do.
the packet.
Put in the packet, fine. Thank you. Mr. Testani?
I just out of my own curiosity's sake, on the receivable piece, is there any outstanding that are, or I'm just curious, on the corporate side, for receivables, at times when companies declare bankruptcies, they're uncollectible receivables, right? I just was curious on the town side if there's any of those.
You talking about on the personal property tax side? We don't have a lot of bankruptcies.
Probably not that, that's,
But yeah, there's times when we try to track what's going on with companies. Companies get behind in their taxes, and address it early if we know a company's, and if we hear about a company or a business that's having problems behind on their taxes, we track that. We try to, collect. But yeah, but our collection rate is what, 98 point something.
And on the revenue side, I'm just curious, you were talking about Sacred Heart. Do you have any projections on what we may see from the community theater improvements? And I know Sacred Heart is taking, I just didn't know if you have any estimates, any guidelines of what we can expect from that, from the fire marshal piece of it at least, or no?
There's a tax exemption on that, so there's no tax revenue coming in from that, right? But there will be, as they do the building and there's building permit revenue and there's fire marshal revenue, but it's not like the big piece in the fire marshal. There's building up at Sacred Heart. It's come in already this year, $253,000. So that's the significant piece.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bassi?
The only other piece is a slight unfavorability with the other. It has to do with the Enviro contract and the compactors that I believe you guys spoke about in your last meeting. That's really the $236,000 projection. That's the other negative variance, which would net with $1 million to get us down to the 764.
Okay, so for the sake of our new members, are you familiar with this situation? If not, Mr. Mayor, can you just give a brief overview then? Thank you.
Yeah, there's two actually problems here. First problem is the town a few months ago, God, it might even be a year ago now, purchased under emergency circumstances 2 compactors for the transfer station. One of the contractors broke down and the other one wasn't working very well. The 2 compactors that were purchased were inadequate for the job. So to supplement the work and to get the work done requires some manual resource input. That manual resource input is about $10,000 a month in overtime, salaries and wages. And we don't think we'll get the new compactors in. We've gone out to bid for new contractors. We have the bids. We're evaluating the 4 bids. But by the time it all goes through the process and installation, et cetera, we're probably not talking until the end of March, excuse me, before install. So we're talking 9 months and $10,000. So you have $90,000 of negative variance there. The other $145,000 has to do with the budgeting process. The current contracts, it was the end of a 5-year contract. They went out to bid. The bids came in actually February 15th. The management of the transfer station did not provide that updated information to the budgeting department. So we ended up being $145,000 under budget because of that. So combination of the 145 and the 90 is 235,000. We discovered the 135 when we put in the Rex this year. Purchasing manages that. So you see the first bills, you see the bills, you see the contract, and multiply by 12, it just didn't compute. So that's how that was discovered.
Okay, so there were 2 issues. One is the wrong compactors, and 2, the new bid was higher than the budget.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Yep, got this right. Hi, Bob. 2 questions. First, I just want to make sure I understand your comments about the $1.4 million. Were you meaning to say that we have additional tax revenue coming in and therefore are not planning the tax sales? Or is that still in here?
What I'm saying is that the prior tax sale was
We've got a
I
tax
think
sale in the budget. We've
in the
got tax
budget,
sales
but I
in the
think it's like,
budget,
I think
right?
it's, I don't remember the exact number, 2 million, 2.5 million or something.
Okay.
That's first piece of information. Second piece of information is that year-to-date through October 31st, the prior year tax collections are already, not including a tax sale, are already $1 million more than we would normally have anticipated at this point in time. So that's a redundancy at this point. So we have, if that continues, that would cover half the tax sale and half the revenue that we were going to have the tax sale for. And then I'm also saying that there's an other favorable revenue on the vehicle real estate side based upon the reasons I stated earlier. There'd be another $1 million, so we might not have to have a tax sale. That's correct.
Understood, okay.
Mr. Mottola?
On that, is there like a deadline when you have to do the tax sale, like a certain date during the year for it to be, I guess, effective?
Well, to get it done by June
Yeah,
30th,
yeah,
we have to make a decision by February.
So if we had we would not do the tax sale if these, you know, if the prior year tax collections came in. So we use that as a mechanism to sort of, you know, I guess fill in, if you will. So on the tax sales, there's a relatively high rate of interest, right? If someone's in default on their taxes.
There's an 18% interest charge for,
Okay.
so it's in our best interest to tax sales, to not do tax sales if the property is, from a
Right.
financial perspective.
Got it, okay. Thank you. And just, and again, with apologies, since this is my first time, I guess I'm
No
just a little
apology
confused
necessary.
by the analysis in general. Maybe, I mean, I'm wondering if there's a way to organize this to kind of bridge the original budget over. So we have these numbers in here, budgeted contribution to surplus and kind of the, you know, overs and unders, but we also had separately the whole fill pile situation and all of those expenses. So is that, how does that play into all of this in terms of, you know, budgeted contribution to surplus and kind of where we stand from the original budget?
Well, this is where we stand from the original budget, given the information we have to date. The town transferred $800,000 that it's to actually take that, it's actually $3.5 million from last year's favorable variance into this year's not into this year's budget, but into our, it didn't, you can do two things with a favorable variance at the end of the year. You can just let it drop to fund balance, or you can make it available for future use. We make it available for future use by parking it in our debt service fund. Okay, we parked $3.5 million in that fund, 1.8 of which was specifically designated for fill pile issues. So if the fill pile issues don't come in at more than 1.8, that's fully covered without any impact on the budget.
The other thing, Ms. Charlton, Munis is our accounting system, I guess is the right way to put it, right? And we don't do it at the first quarterly meeting because the numbers are, so small, right? But every other quarterly meeting, we'll get a full Munis run. And if you had the Munis run in front of you, and tell me if I'm speaking on a turn, you'd see all of the things that Ms. Bossy is reporting to us. She just kind of summarizes them for us. But if you want to see the full Munis report, I mean, the first quarter Munis report is kind of not that interesting, right? But every other quarter, you have the whole budget, and you can see where all those ins and outs occur.
We also provide another report, accounts that have a variance of 10% and $10,000 either over or under budget, with the comments from the department head as well as to why. But for Q1, due to the fact that it's so new and there's so much seasonality, we kind of hold off on that piece until Q2. come February, I will do it as of December 31st, and it will itemize out a revenue file and expense file. So I take the budget, I take 50% of it, compare it to actuals, and if it meets that threshold, the department head is required to comment as to why it's either way over or way under budget.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Bob, can you just keep us updated on that 1.8 million?
Yeah, if you remember, the 800,000 is spendable without Board of Finance coverage. After that $800,000 is gone, any further expenditures require your approval. The current estimate, based upon what we know now and with a little bit of extrapolation into the other 21 sites that are currently being tested, it's like $1,375,000 or something like that is our recent estimate.
Okay. Did you hear any news about Osborne?
Yeah, this is one of the many misunderstood issues with this whole thing. So there was a lot of testing for a multiple number of sites related to Julianville, correct? Many of those sites had no contamination from Julian, but had legacy contamination from just being part of Fairfield and being there. Osborne Field, I think, is one of those sites. I think there was no Julian contamination found, but there was some arsenic found. So they tested the field. So then since they found it there, they went out and they tested the playscape, and then the playscape is next to the parking lot, so they started testing the area around the parking lot. So when snow plows go in there and plow the snow out of the parking lot, sometimes they scrape up the asphalt. Asphalt gets into the grass, so they found asphalt. So that's the contamination that's there.
Asphalt, okay. Do they have to do
Yes,
anything with
because the
this?
asphalt is higher than the minimum allowed.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you for looking into that. Ms. Bossi or Mr. Mayor, anything else?
No, I think that's it. So if you can just do the math, we're anticipating a favorable variance of like 2.7. You add that to the budgeted contribution of 1.3, it's approximately a $4 million estimated increase to balance as of September.
For the purpose of the new members, the budgeted contribution surplus, actually when I start here, it's the percentage of reserve divided by the budget. What's the formal name for that? But anyway, it's that ratio. And the reserve, right, the reserve ratio, percent ratio. It was 5% 7 years ago. Now it's growing up to 11.23 or something like that. But when you have a 3% budget increase on a $300 million budget, that's $9 million. So to maintain your 10% rate, you have to increase the budget another $900,000 with a multiplier, right? So every year, that's what we do to maintain. So that's what that 1.330 number is. That's to keep the
Just to do no harm.
to do no harm to the fund balance account, fund balance ratio.
Mr. Testani?
Is that what you did at this time? Obviously, without the fill pile anomaly, it was really an anomaly, right? Did you have a projection of where you thought the fund balance would be, the estimated increase in the fund balance? That's a pretty decent considering the anomaly, right? So I just was curious, where does it compare to last year?
Well, the fund balance has gone up, like I said, from 5% to 11% over the last 6 years. It's gone up 1% or so every year. I don't remember what it was last year. was 9 point.
It was 10.88 at the end of fiscal 18. We have not finished our 19 audit yet, but we're projecting around 11.2. And that was with moving that 3.5 out.
11.3.
Yeah, the first quarter last year did not look this good by like a long shot, right? But, you know, we keep talking about the Julian, but that money came from last year. So it's not like we burdened this fiscal year with any of that. It's being paid in this fiscal year, but it was paid for or from the prior year's fiscal year.
Right, we moved forward.
Right, the moving forward,
We
right?
moved forward $1.8 million specifically designated to the pile, another 2.7 for reserves for unanticipated or
Right.
future tax mitigation.
Which is not accounted for in here clearly because we're not,
Correct.
we haven't used it yet.
Yeah, because, it's a balance sheet account, not income or expense account.
I mean,
Mrs.
it's a balance sheet account, but in effect, it's reducing the surplus we otherwise would have had, right? Which means
No,
that
it doesn't,
no?
doesn't factor into the surplus.
Well, we
Well-
would have had a larger surplus in 19.
We would have had
Had
a
we
larger
not have moved
surplus,
it.
right?
Yes.
Which then does not flow into the fund balance, which then causes you to have to budget
Well, if you-
additional surplus to get to your 10%, right?
Whenever the budget increase, no, if you let that number drop to the bottom line, that means your required contribution to surplus would be higher.
Yes.
So by not letting it drop to the bottom line, you reduce your required contribution to surplus.
Because we're in a do no
Because
harm
this is-
situation, we would have had a higher fund balance. So we would have had to contribute more to maintain at a higher level. But again, we don't know this for like a year and a half after
Right, okay.
we do the budget as well, so there's.
Okay, hold on.
Right, so in other words, if you let $5 million.
Let me just call, because Mrs. Leclerc has been waiting, and people just keep jumping in, so I want Mrs. Leclerc to get a shot here. Go ahead.
Well, my question wasn't exactly the fund balance, but it was related to the fill pile piece, and that was, did we file insurance claims to at least try to collect on all of the remediation and testing?
We're certainly doing that. I'm not very hopeful, but we are doing that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeWitt, did
Just
you
to
have a
finish
follow-up?
up that last conversation, so if you had an additional $5 million, just to pick a number, fall to your fund balance, then that would mean that for the next year, to maintain your ratio, you'd have to increase your contribution in fund balance by $500,000 with a 10% ratio.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions? So this is an estimate to the end of our fiscal year. I believe last year, it only got stronger and better from the first quarter, correct?
Correct.
All right, we'll see how we do. Okay, any further questions from the board? Ms. Bozzi? You're all set? Mrs. Leclerc, go ahead. Okay. Okay, then we'll go to item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon any communications. Mr. Mayor, do we have any?
No communication received since the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any from the board? Mrs. Leclerc?
Okay, could I ask a question? I know we've had turnover in the first selectman's office. Has the budget process started, and will that be, is that continuing on schedule?
The budget process has started. It will continue on schedule. There have been, one of the items that's not in this, in this schedule that we just went over was the severance pay for the employees that have left, which was total about $55,000. So, but that was after we prepared these papers.
Mrs. Leclerc? All set? Okay. The only thing I'd just like to add is for our board to just take into consideration, we have 3 committees other than the Board of Finance Senior Disabled Tax Relief Committee. But I just asked Mr. DeWitt, can you just give us a quick update on that committee's work and when you feel you'll be able to report back to the board and when you think you'll be complete?
Sure. We met last week. We're still making progress. We're to the point now where we're literally updating the document, which is really good news. After we update the document, we'll then, which could have some financial impacts. We'll then run that by the tax assessor, then by the finance office, just for overall tax impact, right, or tax burden impact. And then we'll have a final number as to how much of an increase we'll be recommending. There will be some increase because the goal is to increase the program. So unfortunately, if you want to increase the program, you got to spend more money. So I'm predicting that we should be wrapped up with everything by well, I think we should be, or I should be sitting here briefing this board in February on our conclusions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. And we have 3 other committees, and just over the next week, you may want to think about which committee you'd like to be a part of. We have the Audit Committee, which is chaired by Mrs. LeClaire. We have the Budget Committee, which is chaired by Mr. DeWitt. And we have the Fund Balance Committee, which is chaired by Mr. Walsh. And so next week, we'll be appointing people to these new committees, or not new board members to these standing committees. And Mrs. LeClaire, you have a meeting on December 3rd before our meeting.
Right.
Okay, so all are welcome. Mr. Mottola will be there. Okay. So that is all I have. If no one has anything else, I just need a motion to adjourn. Mr. Testani, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. All those in favor? Opposed? We are done. Thank you.